I told you that I would be making some cooking videos for you, so I figured I would start with something super easy. Now this is definitely a vegetarian meal, so if you guys aren't into eating meats, this is perfect for you. So some of you guys may or may not know this, but I was a vegetarian until I was 18 years old. Anything with meat I wouldn't eat except for seafood, so fish and shrimp, things like that. Other than that, I wouldn't eat any meats. But one meal that my mom would cook a lot would be tofu, and she would actually bake it. But for this one, I'm actually going to show you how to do it on top of the stove. I just like the taste better. It kind of tastes the same, but this one I think brings out the flavors a lot more. So I'm just going to get started showing you exactly what I use. So for starters, you're going to need some tofu, and the tofu that I use is firm. You can also use extra firm. That's even better, especially if you are going to be frying it. You don't want it to be crumbling. So yeah, I use 2 of these. Now you can also use a variety of vegetables with it. Now for me, I'm going to be using 1 onion, 1 red pepper. I like the red pepper more because it's more sweet, so it just brings the taste of pepper more out than the green. Also, I'm going to be using 1 package of mushrooms. Now I love mushrooms, so I make sure to use a lot of mushrooms. If you don't like mushrooms, you don't have to use it. But I do, so I'm going to be using the whole package. Now tofu generally takes on the taste of whatever you really put into it, so I make sure to season it a lot. So for my seasoning, I'm actually going to be using garlic powder, and then I'm also going to be using some black pepper and some Italian seasoning. Now my family has a lot of high blood pressure, so I don't use salt at all when I'm cooking. If you want to put it in afterwards, then I always have salt on the side for people to put in. Now if you guys like salt, then you can also add salt. Now to oil the food, I'm actually going to be using olive oil. Now you can use the other oil if you want, but olive oil is a lot more healthier, and it actually gives a better taste in the end instead of just basic oil. So if you want to see how I cook this tofu, then just keep watching. So basically this recipe requires a lot of cutting. So to start off, I'm just going to be cutting the red pepper, and I cut it into 4s, and I make sure to also take out the white seeds and things like that that's in the middle. So I'm just going to be cutting the 4 pieces into smaller little sections, so they should actually be coming out as thin as this. So basically I'll just line them up and then cut them into smaller sections, and you want them to be small because the tofu is going to shrink a little, so you don't want to have big pieces of pepper when you have smaller pieces of tofu. So basically I'm going to be cutting the entire red pepper. I'm not going to be leaving anything out. I'm using all of the red pepper, and then once I finish that, I'm going to be placing it into a bowl so that it'll be out of the way and I can move on to the onion. So to start off with the onion, I'm just going to be cutting either end, and then I'm going to be peeling off the outer layers. Once I finish peeling that off, I'm going to cut my onion in half, and then for each half I'm going to cut on the side, so I'm cutting from top to bottom in small sections, and then I'm going to turn it sideways and then cut that from either side, and that will make sure that the onion is cut into small sections. I'm going to do this for both halves of the onions. Now, as I stated before, I'm just using 1 onion. So once I finish cutting the onion, I'm going to be pouring some olive oil into the bottom of the pan that I'm using, and it's about, I'd say, 3 to 4 teaspoons of olive oil. And then I'm going to turn the temperature up to medium-high heat, and then place both the onions and the red peppers inside of this large pot. Now you can use a large frying pan, but I'm using this just because it holds everything. Now I'm stirring everything together, and this will help to mix everything as well as moving the olive oil around. Once I finish that, I'm going to be opening up my mushrooms and placing them into a large strainer. And after I place them in there, I'm going to be taking a knife and just running it through there. This will help to make sure that the mushrooms aren't as large. I don't want them too large. Even though the mushrooms will shrink, I don't want them larger than the tofu, so that's why I am actually cutting them down and making them smaller. Once I finish that, I'm going to be rinsing them off just to clean them. And I'm doing this underneath warm water. Now after you've left the onions and peppers inside the pot for 5 minutes, you're just going to stir it around, and then you're actually going to be placing the mushrooms inside the pot as well. And once you've placed them in, you're going to stir it around too, just to make sure that everything is mixed well. So you're going to leave these together to saute for about 5 minutes, and while you're doing that, you're going to open up your tofu. Now I like to tap it on the side because that way I won't be cutting the tofu when I open it. So I cut it with a knife and then slide it open, and there's going to be extra water. So in order to take out that water, I'm just going to the sink and then squeezing all of the extra water out. Now once I've done that, I'm removing the tofu from the package. Then I'm turning the tofu on its side and I'm cutting it into 3 separate sections. So I'll be cutting it twice. And you want to make sure that when you cut it, you're able to actually remove each section separately. That's how you know that you've cut it correctly. Now once I've done that, I'm going to be cutting each section, I'd say about 1/2 inch. You want to make sure that each base is about a knife length apart. So I'm just cutting that, and then I'm actually turning it the long way and then cutting each section. By cutting it this way, you're turning them into small squares. Now once you finish that and left all the previous ingredients to saute for about 5 minutes, you're just going to stir it one time before you place in your tofu. And then you're going to place your tofu in. Now you're going to see a little bit of extra water, and that's normal when you're working with tofu. Now that I've done that, I'm going to be placing in all of my seasonings. So I'm putting in about 3 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, and then I put in about 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and I put in a lot of garlic powder. I'd say about 3 to 4 teaspoons. Once you put in all of your seasonings, you're just going to stir it around to make sure that everything has gotten all of the seasonings that you have put. And then after that, you're going to be placing it to a medium-high heat and placing a top on it, and just leave it for 25 minutes, stirring it probably every 5 to 10 minutes. So this is how it's going to look when it's done. It's not going to be soupy, but it is going to have a little sauce, so you want to get it with an open spoon. Now this recipe is super easy and it tastes so good. If you guys want any more recipe ideas or different things to cook, definitely let me know and I'll make more videos for you.